As always, like and subscribe if you're enjoying my off-meta build challenge videos, and you can see the timestamps if you want to skip ahead and not watch the build breakdown and jump into PvP. Hey everybody, welcome back to another build challenge video. Today I'm going to be focusing on the vertical missiles, a very difficult to employ and sort of counterintuitive piece of equipment in this game. The vertical missiles definitely do have some issues, and one of the big ways to kind of think about is that their tracking doesn't hit the opponent if they're moving for the most part, at least if they're moving laterally. So before I break them down, just a couple of things I think that FromSoft ought to have adjusted on these and rebalanced them. I would improve the tracking the higher an opponent is off the ground. So basically, they would function the opposite of vertical plasma missiles. Instead of forcing people into the air, this would force them to the ground. And there isn't really a missile that does that right now. So that would be a pretty cool way to make these get stronger, or to make them stand out. And they would be stronger against things like lambs, other aerial builds, as they'd have to be moving extremely fast to make the missiles miss if they're going to be up that high. So that's one thing that I would do. Secondly, I think they need to be the reload needs to be improved on these because these missiles require a high level of skill to employ, and I'll talk about why in a sec. But they're not nearly as usable as they are able to reward you for successfully pulling off like the ways you can use this missile. So I do think they should reduce the reload to, like, the heaviest one I think should be about 4 seconds, but that's another thing that I would change. And then also I think that the attack window of the vertical missiles, once you fire them, I think the duration that they drop is a little too long. They need to tighten that up a little bit. And I would also improve the direct hit adjustment on the missiles to make them about 200%, as these missiles functionally are a more of a defensive type missile and one that can be employed as an addition to your Stagger Punish. So that's largely what I think needs to change on the vertical missiles. But let's talk about what you can do with the vertical missiles to make them useful. So if they don't hit opponents, they don't function like normal missiles, they tend to become sort of prediction and firing stance shutdown. Prediction punish and firing stance shutdown. So if you're up against reverse joints and bipeds, it's quite strong for that reason, but not so much against tanks and tetras. Again, though, that would be fixed if they made the changes to the tracking. Okay, so we can use this to punish firing stances on two-legged mechs. We can punish anything that holds your opponent still briefly. So, for example, if you know that they're going to go for a kick, firing the missiles off it early, and quite early, by the way. The vertical missiles do require a very generous sort of prediction as to when you think the opponent's going to try to do something that you want to punish. But you can think of the missile sort of like it buys you a little bit of time where they can't do that attack without taking on a massive amount of punish for doing it, at least if you're running the heavy vertical missiles like I am. So we can punish kick attempts, especially if we intercept them with a mini stun of our own, so they get double held still. That's kind of one of the reasons we're going to run the Wurger. You can punish slower opponents who redline in the air due to them not being able to drift sideways fast enough. But you can even punish lightweights if they attempt to go for a deadfall, which is where you kill your booster and drop extra fast, which is going to synergize really well with our energy choice as well, because like energy generators usually want to stay on the ground as they have a punishing EN recharge delay as is. So you need like every opportunity to get your energy back. But if you are fighting in the air and you know you're both almost out of battery, fire the vertical missiles and deadfall yourself. They can choose to deadfall with you to stay on top of you but take the missiles, or they have to let you drop ahead and get your energy back and keep a little bit of space out. They also are really good as a stagger punish multiplier. Now, granted, all missiles can sort of be done this way, but the vertical missiles have really good stats and attack power. Maybe not quite enough given how spread out the window is. I think if they don't tighten the window, then they should improve the damage and the impact. But it is worth noting that if you run non-firing stance weapons, and you'll see I did this in this build, I made it so that my punish lets me fire all 3 other weapons at the same time while the vertical missiles are hitting, so that it can come up with a massive stagger punish that takes advantage of the vertical missiles. And then I follow up with a charged Wurger at the end as a way to further enhance that damage if they don't pop Pulse Armor, as well as giving a mini stun at the end to let me get my energy back. But yeah, so if you are going to run the vertical missiles and you want to take advantage of the fact that they one of the few reasons you're going to use this missile and invest in it is also to enhance a stagger punish. You don't want to be running a firing stance typically, unless it's something like maybe the slicer where you're holding them still for the majority of the animation, and the vertical missiles have enough time to actually drop the entire salvo on top of them. Yeah, so that's basically how I think the vertical missiles can be used. They function best with stagger extension option weapons as well, like for example Zimmerman, so that the stagger window is longer. Here I run the charged worker at the very end, but I fire all weapons before the stagger runs out, just to get in a massive amount of DPS. And I'll show you the stagger punish right now, actually, because it's a lot of damage. And an interesting note here is that this doesn't even include the charged worker. In short, I think that the vertical missiles work best with weapons that use fire over time rather than bursts like Zimmerman's, and then also no firing stances, because the firing stances do interrupt the vertical missile salvo. You want your mech to be able to use the vertical missiles covering fire from firing stances in order to dump all of your other weapons freely and not have to worry about QBing so much. So I think in general you're looking for a mech that is going to try not to have to QB too much while going on the offense. And then in our case here, we're going to end up running the BST booster to shuffle once our weapons overheat or are needing to cool down, so that we have almost like pseudo invulnerability. You're not actually invulnerable, but you mitigate so much damage and impact buildup when you're AB shuffling while you're waiting for your weapons to cool. So it looks like this. I did forget to mention, actually, you can flush out heavier builds that are just hiding behind cover. It's sort of like the vertical plasmas. Now, granted, most opponents will know that this is coming and they may wiggle, but it's such a long firing animation that a lot of times you can snipe a charged worker and splash them for trying to hide behind the cover. So they do function really well with the charged Kurosawa in order to flush out people that tend to hide behind cover. The stagger punish multiplier, just so you know, right now is about 2,232 explosive damage. It's a great way to mitigate your damage type because we're running so much energy. Having a portion of it be explosive is a nice way to sort of get around energy resistant mechs. So that is another nice thing about the vertical missiles, is blending your damage type as well. With all of that, let's just work backwards from the vertical missiles, and we will kind of like see how the build chains into all the different pieces. So first off, we need 3 non-firing stance weapons, or at least weapons that have good use of the non-firing stance. And largely, I think we want to go for a DPS build because the vertical missiles are never going to be as good as other missiles at doing impact buildup in most cases. And I think one of the other things you want to do with the vertical missile is, if the matchup your opponent build is just completely useless to have vertical missiles, you want to have a good advantage from purging it. So in this case, the build gets a massive EN supply lift, and we also drop our weight, and our QB reload time gets a little tighter as well as we get underneath that max weight of the BST booster. So if we're up against like a lightweight with 0 firing stances, the stagger punish isn't even a firing stance. Oh, and I did forget to mention, you can also use the vertical missiles defensively if your opponent has a stagger punish that holds them still. So like the moonlights, redshifts, bazookas, if you fire the missile and then wait like a couple seconds, then let them stagger you, they're going to go for their punish, and then the missiles will drop on their head for a massive amount of impact. And a lot of times you can instantly stagger them back. So that's another sneaky little trick. Anyway, so yeah, we want 3 non-firing stance weapons, and we want the ability to have a mini stun in there to take advantage of the ability for the vertical missiles to do more damage when we land it, hence the worker. We also want, I think energy in general is a great way to go, as again, it's just really good for DPS and it works really well against lightweights. Now we're going to run the 20C generator because if you're going to run a DPS build, you usually don't want to be a super lightweight, or you're just going to be too fragile against a lot of build types. And so we're going to go for a 85k weight heavy biped here. Not quite heavy, maybe mid-heavy. Which weapons we're going to chain is going to matter a lot. So the first one I went to, other than the Wurger, for that very useful sort of blend of energy damage, mini stun, stagger extend, and also a rush down shutdown tool against things like kicks and melee weapons, is we want to have a very high DPS weapon, and the Sawa is one of the best. You'll notice it does 312 base damage with a fire rate of 3.4, and that's also getting multiplied. So this is over 1,000 damage per second, and it's plasma, which means it's really good for getting around shields because it's fire over time and splash. It's got a great synergy with the Wurger for the charged attacks impact. And if you open up with a Wurger, then follow up with a charged Kurosawa, there really isn't any mechs that can mitigate that and not get staggered if they take both of it. The biggest weakness is going to be if they have shields, in which case you have to shift to not using the charged Kurosawa attack and just going for pure DPS. Okay, so if we got those two, and we are going to be running a close range build if you're running vertical missiles. Again, if you're up against double missiles of any other type, you're just going to be in a losing matchup. Okay, so if we're going to run close up, what's a great right shoulder weapon that's taking advantage of our energy DPS style, synergizing with the vertical missile? Well, the Kranich, not only does this help us out a lot with shield builds, as it helps us add a meaningful amount of impact to them if they're trying to block, but also it's got insane DPS in its own right. Again, getting multiplied by the energy generator. I'm just going to refer to the base damage here, but at 10 shots per second, it's basically adding 850 DPS, stacking with 1,000 off of the Sawa. And then the worker is relatively small compared to the other two weapons at 500 and change. You actually don't use the worker too much. It's mostly just to have a follow-up punish with a charged shot at the end of their stagger wake up. Also to synergize with the Kurosawa, and also be careful with the worker. If you're about to get a stagger punish and they're like a lightweight and it's going to be difficult, you just need to snag that charged worker to get the finish. If you fire the worker uncharged, there's a little bit of a delay before it starts charging. So I would suggest, especially if you're like like spamming it, you'll see how long it took to charge there. So I think it's better to hold off on the last shot, like when they're almost staggered. Just start charging the worker a little bit in advance. And one of the nice things about running the Kranich and the Sawa together, instead of missiles on the shoulder, is that you get a little bit of help with finishing off the impact buildup rather than just relying on the Kurosawa. So you can mitigate the heat there. Now, with this weapon payload, we are going to be very mindful of our heating on the right side, particularly as these weapons do overheat really quick. You really want to get a sense of the rhythm of what these two weapons require in terms of time to start to hold off on firing. I would suggest holding the right shoulder and just spamming the left, and then lay off on the right shoulder a little bit early. Then once you need your cooling, this is a perfect time to start shuffling. Instead of spamming the top right shoulder, you can also just fan the trigger with the Sawa, like just spam tapping it. That'll get them a little more in line so that the shoulder doesn't overheat a little bit ahead. But yeah, the idea here is not to overheat them and try to take advantage of the generator's cooling assist as much as possible to really maximize your DPS. For the weapon payload that we're going to run, because we're a close range build, we're going to want to run a close range FCS first. And I kind of already mentioned the generator reason. We want a really high capacity with good EN supply efficiency. So the 20C here was kind of forced. We couldn't really do any of the other ones, as this one doesn't have enough EN supply. This one doesn't have enough capacity to chase. And then the 20D, it doesn't really give us that huge lift in cooling that we kind of want. Although the EN recharge delay would have been nice, especially the post-recovery EN supply. You could play with this. I just think the Kurosawa needs a little bit of help on the charge up time, especially after the first shot is done. The second one, you're very vulnerable, given that you're this heavy, if that window is too long. So you've only got so long to cool during that shuffle with the assault boost. So yeah, I think that the 20C made sense here. Again, also because we're a DPS build, I kind of want to focus on a DPS generator rather than just the movement generator. But with that said, the VE20C comes with a lot of weaknesses, particularly in the EN recharge delay. So we're going to stack the BST booster. Again, I kind of already explained why with shuffling. And then the Abbott, we don't want to run the Acellus even though we don't have missiles, because we do want the ability to snipe tanks at medium range. And so, yeah, without having to go close to them, you want to be able to poke with the Kurosawa at medium range. To have just a little bit of assist there. Okay, so with the Kranich and the Kurosawa, now we have to factor in how do we get tanky but still have enough recoil control and not reasonably expensive in EN and weight? Well, the Melander arms with that 128 recoil control are a major assist on that factor. You also need to factor in the arm load, as the Kurosawa was quite heavy, so I ended up going for the Melander arms. You could make some small tweaks with, like, say, the 46 arms if you want more energy defense, and there is an argument for that because double LRB shield builds can be a bit annoying. You might have to tweak the head choice, though, if you want to do that, but I wanted more stability. So now, because we're a DPS build with no shield, another thing that we need to do is make sure we have enough stability in order to have the ability to chase down some of those lightweights and not get staggered. The HAL legs are kind of the sweet spot for the BST booster, I think, in terms of their leg load and then their stats and stability. From there, the Mind Alpha core is usually best in slot, just across the board. It's very usually you start with this core and work away from it if ever on your builds, but we don't really need to worry about booster efficiency, so there's no incentive to run the 40S because we're assault boosting, which doesn't take into account that stat. So let's take the extra stability, extra defensive stats, particularly energy defense, and still having a good generator supply adjust and generator output. So that is how we get to the core. And then finally, the cast warhead is just the highest amount of stability that we can afford, as well as it has a pretty good scan. Not that scan's huge, but it is nice to be able to keep awareness behind cover. And when they're trying to rush in on you, as we are a close range build, we want to be able to get the jump on them. So that scan standby time is really powerful. We never really have any downtime with our scans. We can just keep spamming it and keep a lock on them. But mainly it's just it's super lightweight, allowing us to stack stats on the arms, core, and legs, whereas the head doesn't have too much in the way of AP and resistances, at least percentage-wise compared to the other pieces. But it does have stability, so we are going to squeeze out the most out of stability and also the most out of system recovery. Another reason I've always loved this head is its resilience to stun guns, so which could also hamper our DPS so without a shield. So that is another reason that I ran the Cast Warhead. And that basically covers everything in terms of the frame parts. Expansion-wise, I think in general, Pulse Armor is probably the best. There's a couple of situations where I think Assault Armor would have been better. Like, for example, Shield, Heavy Bipeds. Because we don't have a massive punish compared to something like a Slicer, we oftentimes have to stagger those types of builds 3 times in order to finish them, or maybe 2 if we get most of our punish in the first time. And if they have a shield, having the ability for them to cool their shield behind their pulse armor is really annoying because then we have to rework it down. And I think that just having the shortcut, even if it means you lose a stagger race, at least you get rid of their shield earlier with assault armor. But c'est la vie, it's not the end of the world. I think that that one particular matchup is mitigatable just with like proper play and heat management with your right side weapons. Whereas the pulse armor means we don't have to worry about countering other opponents' pulse armors with our assault armor. So that is a big issue with the 20C because you don't have that EN recharge delay to keep up the aggression and keep the fight up close quite as powerfully as things like the Santai, Hakoshi, etc. I feel like trying to secure the assault armor counter is very difficult with this generator, so I think erring on the side of pulse armor is better, especially given that we're a DPS build. So yeah, that's basically how you get all of these frame parts. Couple notable mentions. The NGI booster would have been nice, especially with the ability to, with not only with higher boost speed, but the ability to climb really well. It would have been nice. It just really hampers us on the shuffling. It's too hungry, and that leaves us vulnerable, especially against things like double Zimmermans. Its QB reload isn't quite as fast, although at our weight, granted it's not doing a major amount of difference, but it's just too expensive. And then the other one I was thinking about was the Brazel, which there is an alternate version of this build that uses this, and it does help us with kites, but that QB shuffling is just too long of a QB reload, and also up in close range builds we end up really missing that upward thrust, and we also miss that QB reload time, and we end up just getting sort of bullied around against things like double pistols, double zims, etc. So I think best in slot is going to have to be the BST booster, the PO4, and just accepting that certain super lightweight kites, whether it be lambs, missile rats, or like, I don't know, reverse joint cast war leg kites with rifles, those are just going to be tough matchups in general. So I want to mention that you don't have to hold the bubble guns on the top right. You can, but it will overheat a little faster than the Kurosawa, which takes a bit more mental energy to focus on keeping them efficient, like putting out DPS, but not overheating. I actually prefer to just fan the trigger the same way that I pull the Kurosawa. So play around with it yourself, but the idea is to make sure that they're not overheating and that you're getting the most DPS out of them possible. As for chasing down kites, which are one of the toughest matchups, I think purging the vertical missiles and the Wurger make the most sense, just in order to get your weight as low as possible and add a decent amount of velocity to your assault boost, but also just lifting that EN supply. And don't forget to soft lock and QB shuffle at an angle to pseudo increase your velocity. And don't head straight towards them, try to head to where they're going in order to cut down the path distance. All right, let's start with PvP. I got to have actually 2 matchups with bait cakes with double melee, so why don't we start with that. The double melees are going to have a very hard time approaching our build. Your general strategy is charge Worger into charge Kurosawa kick, bubble them while you back up, and I would usually purge the vertical missiles. So there's a point for potentially keeping it here if I opened up with them in order to punish any charged oscillator attacks like that one there. But honestly, this is a pretty strong matchup in your favor. I think the one mistake I'm doing right here, though, is that I'm burning out my generator. Never do that, because most double melee builds are going to be running a assault armor. So what you want to do is ensure that you've always got a little bit of energy, even if it means taking the pulse blade lunge, in order to assault boost tech once you activate your pulse armor, and then open up into a charged Worger. And that'll stagger them and then give you a chance to reset anyways from the 1400 impact buildup. So if you don't know about the assault boost tech, essentially it just means you want to activate assault boost such that the assault armor hits you while it's charging up. So you still get the mitigation. It's going to reduce the impact to 1400. Silly that they haven't patched that, but alas, this is the game we got. So yeah, I would. Another thing too is because Baitcakes is running a lighter double melee build here than I typically run. Like I'm usually 75k, and definitely the Mind Alpha Howl legs. We can actually get away with just chipping him with the Kurosawa and taking away some of the risk of just using the bubbles to chip health. We can get a lot more health bleed off. Like it's more threatening because of his lighter weight and less energy defense. So yeah, you don't even have to go for the charged Kurosawa per se. You could literally just Worger, hose him down with the Kurosawa while gaining height, just rinse, repeat, and then by the time they do stagger you, and as long as you saved energy to assault boost tech the assault armor, it's basically going to be over pretty quickly. Okay, moving on to double Zim archetypes. If they have a ranged punish, it's a little bit trickier of a matchup, but we'll start with the double earshot version. So the main thing with this one is remember your vertical missiles are really good at punishing them trying to go for an earshot up high in the air. So I do often have a dilemma on what matchups to purge the vertical missile for energy supply versus what not to. But usually bipeds running, especially if it's doubles on the shoulder, it's usually worth keeping it as there's, if not, just getting lucky with early hits, as I think I do here. Yeah, I get a couple of vertical missiles. just having that tool, even if you're about to get staggered and know you're about to lose it, interrupting their earshot punish is very frustrating for them. So I think that you don't really need too much energy, as they have to close the gap to me in this case without missiles. So I don't think energy is going to be quite as much of an issue on these types of matchups. The long and short is, the heavier they are, the more important it is to go for a charged Kurosawa at level 2 after the charged Wurger opening. Yeah, and then the bubbles don't underestimate how good the bubbles can be at long range chip damage, because they have really good effective range. Even if they have slow projectile speed, as long as you're backing up and if they don't have missiles to pressure you, they're going to have to walk into it, and it's getting multiplied by your energy generator as well. So yeah, just don't forget that those bubbles are a long range poke tool. Okay, for melee punishes, especially the dagger here, I could pretty much bet my bottom dollar that they're usually running assault armor if they're running the dagger, so they can get the double punish. If they aren't, it doesn't really change anything, but the long and short here is, again, just making sure you have enough energy to assault boost tech the assault armor. And with reverse joints, it's a bit more complicated to get the charged Wurger opening, because they can kick from so far and it's a little committal, and you can't even really risk going for a kick of your own. So just height play is going to be more important in these cases in order to try to limit the amount of faking out that they're going to try to risk with the reverse joint legs. I don't think there's really too much else to mention here, other than just dead falling here with the vertical missiles is kind of a powerful tool. It really gives me that space to ensure I get my energy back. And I'm opening with the Wurger so that if I miss, I don't lose the charged Kurosawa cooling, which makes me very vulnerable. So yeah, the extra cooling on the VE generators also really helped me here. Okay, so now focusing on shield builds, the main thing here is just not going for the charged Karasawa and charged Wurger, and instead just going for sheer DPS. Managing your heat buildup of the two right weapons in order to maximize the amount of DPS you can put out is going to be critical. I'm going to purge the vertical missiles because my opponent is not running a firing stance, and he's also a lightweight. The odds of it contributing too much is pretty slim. So instead, I'm just going to take the extra EN supply and the improvement on my QB reload and weight, and yeah. That's basically more valuable to me, especially as a lightweight. They really can't afford to chip. I also want to keep the fight in the air so that if I do get staggered, I drop, and they have to kind of like chase me down and spend more energy. I think I'm running assault armor here, which probably is not helping me as the even if I did win the stagger race, I wasn't likely to be able to counter their pulse armor, and they also are going to parry my assault armor. So yeah, it doesn't matter. I still end up winning the match, but you can see what I mean about that. Just lightweights cannot afford to DPS trade this build. Even with the shield, it's like we're able to overwhelm it regardless. And disregard the last shield match. I'm talking in the middle of it, so I won't add commentary, but I'm playing with a buddy, and yeah, just sort of testing the build. It's an energy damage-based build with a shield that I'm fighting in that case. If they're now a pretty scary matchup can be double Zimmerman, PS shield, super heavy biped. Now, if they're lighter, it's usually not as much of an issue, but we don't have quite as much AP as them, and the double Zimmermans are very difficult to shrug off in assault boost shuffling very often. So just careful management of the shield stripper to really maximize that stagger buildup, and try to get your stagger on par with theirs is going to be critical. You really want to save your assault boost shuffling. You want to be assault boost shuffling whenever your weapons are overheated. Don't forget to, although that shouldn't be happening. If it does, just remember you need to make careful management of your energy. I would also just recommend going for the charged Wurger Stagger Punish, as you want to get in that damage before their pulse armor, and you're not going to have assault armor to counter their shield, or to force their shield to get overheated a little bit quicker. So I didn't get any matches. I didn't see any doubles in PS shield, I don't believe, but interesting. And then the same goes for double LRB, super heavy bipeds. All of those builds have enough health that your DPS may start to trail if they get a good stagger punish on you, and if you don't overwork their shield quick enough. You could try to exploit going above them as well in order to shoot behind the shield. The splash damage of the Karasawa is good for that, and these bubbles are also a bit wider of a hitbox. You might be able to sneak in more true damage behind the shield if you do that. It's really just boils down to careful management of the weapons overheating in order to not accidentally hamper your DPS, and then secondly, really landing the bubbles whenever they pull up the shield. So trying to get a rhythm of that is critical. stuck with it. I didn't look at you. Had explosive thrower and LS shotgun. I didn't see what the a shield, right? Yeah, it was a shield. Yeah, actually, I am pretty surprised people are still playing teams, to be honest. Vertical missile for the win, yo! No, it is. I know it doesn't seem like it is, but the thing is, every time you do a firing stance, like your explosive thrower, your LS shotgun, the missiles are punishing with like 500 to 1,000 impact. And the general idea with the build is just to go for sheer DPS while the missiles prevent firing stances. What do you mean, same moves? I don't know what the circle of death. You mean like when you assault boost shuffle? For the various close-range impact build-up builds, whether that be pistols, Etzogens, one thing you want to look at is the booster. So if they don't have the gills or the Alula, you can usually go for the charged Kurosawa to stagger them outright if they're not super heavy. If they're lightweights, it's a little too risky to try to go for that shot, and you can lose the match if it misses. So I would just say take the safer approach of DPSing them with the charged Kurosawa bubbles and the worker just sort of assist. And you should be able to bleed their health out. Just ensure that if they're orbiting you, you're QB like intercepting them. So like, see if they dodge to the left, you want to dodge to your 7 or 8 o'clock. If they dodge to your right, you want to dodge to your like 4 or 5 o'clock, and that puts you right beside them. And even though they may not be on your screen, just keep shooting, and you should be hitting them pretty aggressively and bleeding off their health faster than they can secure the win. Granted, if they're running the slicer, they may be able to outright end the fight, or the bunker, but most lightweights are going to run the bunker, and the slicer's a bit of a rare punish on these types of builds. The main thing against the slicer, I would just say, is create height instability. So like, try to go up in the air and make it so you drop when you get staggered, when you activate your pulse armor. The reason I don't think you're going to see that build that often is nowadays most people, lightweights, don't want to run that because if the opponent's running assault armor, it's just too much health bleed off if they try to go in for their stagger punish, and they end up dying before they can get the second stagger. So pistols can stagger way too quickly for you to risk getting too close to them for too long. So I think in general, the main thing you're looking to do, like always against pistols for most builds, is to cause them to deflect by being just outside of their range as much as possible. Not going to need the vertical missiles most likely unless they have a stagger punish that warrants it. But in this case, I'm just going to take the energy and the movement. I think even regardless, you're usually going to take those advantages over the vertical missiles. Yeah, playing a lot of height game is good as a way to create instability and making it very difficult for them to keep the pistols working while we bleed their health. Yeah, that's basically how the build's going to handle that. I have assault armor in this case, not very useful, but say la vie. Would have been better to have pulse armor. So rifling builds are going to be some of the most dangerous as they can poke you at extreme range and it forces you to go in the offense with your generators less than ideal EN recharge delay. It's got good capacity, which is going to help, but I think in general the lack of any sort of chase down missiles on this build is going to really force the bubbles to do a lot of the work and cause them to not just move straight backwards while the Carousel is dumping in as well. Looking to shuffle, especially if it's Harris's, which have slower fire rates, you should be able to shuffle once you get a sense of the rhythm. And the charge Carousel can be really valuable if they aren't running the Alula or the Gales. I think this is a BST booster, so once you get the health lead, don't feel the need to chase. Some people may call this scummy, but the truth is if you're running a kite build, I ain't sweating it. So yeah, just looking to set up the charged Kurosawa into charged Warger if I can get it. Sometimes you won't be able to, and then hiding behind cover just to prevent them chipping you away. So probably our easiest matchup is super heavy biped elevator build. So we have just lots of things working for us here. We've got the ability to hit them for good DPS at range with the Kurosawa and the bubble guns. The vertical missiles also hit them quite frequently because they're usually just going straight up. Secondly, the vertical missiles also buy you a really strong window where they can't risk firing their shoulder pieces without taking a huge punish. So don't use it too early. I kind of popped it right off the bat here. It ends up working in my favor because the opponent just got really greedy with the shoulder pieces, in which case that's good, but if they hold off on it, you can often get a lot of damage in before they even risk running the shoulders. I'm also running assault armor, which is not helping here, as the pulse armor is kind of like would have been safer, just especially because I'm not going to kill them in the first stagger. But what's working in our favor as well is the booster choice. So we've just got such good ability to shuffle and have plenty of energy to try baiting out that shoulder piece, and then backing off when our battery's getting into the last 1/3 or so, so that if they try to poke us upon us going to the ground, we've got enough to reactivate and shuffle away again. We also have enough stagger to outright stagger them with a charged worker into charged Kurosawa. You can make the call based on the opponent's weapon types, what's more valuable. Like if they're running Etsugens, maybe just go for a shutdown tool to cut out their offense quickly, or you can, in this case where I'm just not really too worried about their ability to damage me once I get in close, I can just chip them away at range, but or even if I get in close, just not even worrying about insta staggering. But it is nice if they're running the shoulder pieces and they're very patient with them to just outright shut it down by staggering them, kicking, and rinse repeat. Put the burden on them to chase you, and if they don't, as I'm doing in this case, just don't get lulled into getting aggressive just because you're winning, because they can delete you quite quickly. So just force them to come to you. In this case, the opponent's really trying hard to convince me to get in there, but I ain't having it. For Tetras, opening with a kick is a really good idea. It really makes it hard for them to dodge the follow-up Wurger as it takes away their hover mode. The vertical missiles are also a little bit better at hitting Tetras because they are a wider hitbox from a top-down view. And again, they don't have firing stances as they're able to move, so it's not going to quite shut down their firing stance, but it does have the ability to multiply your Wurger's impact if you land it while the missiles are dropping. In this case, because the opponent looks like they've got good EN supply, I'm going to, again, because of the shield, I just know I'm not going to be able to get the charged Wurger and the charged Kurosawa so easy, so I'm just going to bubble gun, trying to bleed out that PB buckler, and then look to set up the charged Wurger and Kurosawa once the PB is overwhelmed, as that thing only has a couple of charges. So if he was running the PS, I'd just be going for outright DPS instead of the charge attack. But the PB buckler is overwhelmable. It doesn't have quite enough charges to use aggressively against something like the bubble gun Kurosawa DPS. And I'll end off on just some interesting builds here. Here we got a bubble gun build, so also known as the microwave, although sometimes people put the two handheld versions on the shoulders and just keep weapon swapping them. The main thing here is to, if they're a lightweight, you really want to be careful with your Kurosawa hit. You really got to shut down their offense quickly. You can do that with a charged Kurosawa, but usually with lightweights that are running Gills or Lula, I'm just not going to chance it. I'm just going to go for outright DPS with the with my own bubble gun and Wurger and Kurosawa pressuring them. Now, if I don't think the vertical missiles are going to help in this case because they're a lightweight. Again, you really have to look at their build and see if there's anything that the vertical missiles can contribute. Stagger races are really not going to be, or Stagger Punish is likely not going to be a thing here, as I'm fighting a lightweight. We're both going to bleed out our health pretty rapidly. I do end up setting up the Kurosawa in this case once I realize that my DPS isn't quite keeping up in this case, but you got to be very careful with if you're going to go for that on a lightweight. And so yeah, end up relying on that habit, charge Kurosawa to put in work. I believe this opponent's using the SPD booster, which is one of the reasons the Kurosawa is so reliable. They don't have the QV thrust. Could be wrong about that, but it does end up working for me here once I get in close. So thanks everybody. If you enjoyed, again, don't forget, like, subscribe, maybe tell a friend, and hope you enjoyed this latest edition of the build optimization around off-meta items.